So welcome everyone. This is the second event in our series on Buddhism and social change. My name is Chris Queen, and these lectures are an outgrowth of the guest lectures that I've enjoyed sponsoring through about 21 years of offering this course here at Harvard. Last year we actually had 9 guest lecturers. I don't know how we got through that. There was, I don't know if some of you were at Extension last fall. We had a blackout one night in Seaver Hall, and we had a guest who played the Takahashi flute and another guest who played the meditation drum, and we sat on the floor in the hall and we got through the blackout. But this is a little different. We have some distinguished lecturers from various parts of the world. Last time, most of you were here and were able to hear Dr. Gail Omvet from India talk about the Ambedkar movement of ex-untouchables who have become Buddhists. Tonight we are talking about innovations in American Buddhist ministry. And I am so delighted to introduce Sumi Loundon Kim and Tony Stultz, who were former students in this class. And they have both gone out and found ways of reaching Buddhists who are not being served by Buddhist ministry or even aware that such a thing as Buddhist ministry was possible or existed. And in a minute, I'd like to just speak extremely briefly, because I want to give them lots of time to talk about their work, about how this room actually played a part in setting the stage for the advances that we'll be hearing about tonight. Meanwhile, I'd like to thank the Harvard Divinity School's Buddhist Ministry Colloquium for co-sponsoring this series and welcoming us here to the Braun Room for these 4 lectures, and particularly Willa Miller, whom I'll introduce in just a moment, who's the instructor of the course, Leslie McPherson-Artinian, who is the administrator, and Julie Gillette, who is really the director of the Buddhist Ministry Program at HDS, and who has recently had twins. And they are beautiful twins indeed. So thank you, HDS, for making this possible and for having us here in this room. These sessions are being taped. I'm not sure yet how they will become available to all of us to see again, or to those who were unable to make it, but that will be announced at a future time. There is food and drink in the back. It's kind of intended to be a reception for afterwards, but if you want to slip back there and do a little noshing or bring it to your seat, I don't think anybody's going to put you under arrest. And finally, for those of you who are visiting and guests, the next event is November 21st, also a Thursday night at 5:30, Buddhist Peacemaking in War-Torn Lands with Dr. Paula Green, who is an internationally known peacemaker and who's been in many, many life-threatening parts of the world, helping people to communicate and listen to each other. And finally, on December 5th, Buddhist Self-Sacrifice in Tibet, The Survivors Speak. We'll hear Fulbright scholar Patrick Dowd report some of his interviews with family members who have lost a loved one to self-immolation over the past year and a half. More than 100 people have burned themselves alive to protest what's going on in Tibet. So welcome to outside guests, and I'd like to ask Willa to come up and say a few words about the colloquium and perhaps about tonight's theme. Willa?
I just want to start by saying how delighted I am to be in the presence of Venerable Sumi, Reverend Sumi, and also Sensei Anthony, who I just met right before the talk. We live in a historic time, at the present time, when Buddhism has come. It's about 45 years old. I mean, it's older than that, but 45 years of real influx in this country, and it's undergoing remarkable transformations. And as Chris Queen was saying, it's beginning to serve the needs of average Americans in this country and meeting them where they are. So I really see Sumi and Sensei Anthony as pioneers in this movement and on the cutting edge of that kind of transformation and meeting Americans where they are in their daily life. Even here at HDS, as Chris was saying, we have a new colloquium, Buddhist Ministry Colloquium, and a class in Buddhist ministry, things that probably would have been impossible or unthinkable even 10 years ago. And here they are. Now they're even here in the Divinity School. So it really shows us that Buddhism is beginning to really percolate into the roots of everyday communities, not just in monasteries or in retreat centers, but really percolating out into the daily lives of people. So anyway, I don't want to take up much time. I just want to say how glad I am to be here and to thank Sumi and Anthony for coming tonight. Thank you.
Just two other quick thank yous that I forgot to mention before, and that's, I guess I neglected to say that our course, Buddhism and Social Change, is Religion 1700W, which means it's a writing-intensive course, is offered at the Harvard Extension School, a very proud part of Harvard University, which is now over 100 years old and has served tens of thousands of Greater Boston citizens and now citizens all over the world who are able to take our courses online as well. And the Extension School has a proud tradition of offering Harvard instructors courses and resources for a fraction of the course that their classmates here at Harvard Divinity School and the other traditional, more familiar schools at Harvard can boast. So thank you to Dean Mary Higgins and to Mark Lax in the Academic Administration Office at the Harvard Extension School for supporting this public lecture series and making these events available to the public as well. I mentioned this room and the role that it played. In May 1997, this room was the place of a conference called American Buddhism, Methods and Findings in Recent Scholarship, that brought together the top scholars who were studying the rising and dramatic phenomena of Buddhism in America. Not only convert Buddhists, Caucasian Buddhists, meditating Buddhists, but Buddhists who brought their faith and their practice from Asia as long ago as the 19th century. The first Buddhists in America, of course, were not hippies or college students. They were Chinese and Japanese immigrants who came looking for work. They helped to build a transcontinental railroad and many other things. And the first settlements of Buddhists were in places like San Francisco and LA and not on the East Coast. So this conference was quite a landmark event. And it resulted in a book, which you can get at the library. It's rather expensive if you order it on Amazon now. It's called American Buddhism, Methods and Findings in Recent Scholarship, and was edited by a doctoral student at the time, Duncan Ryukin Williams, and myself. I was the academic convener. And many of the researchers who have continued to chart the development of this American Buddhism made some of their first observations about the shape of all of this back in '97. And I just want to read two brief excerpts from the beginning of this book to set the stage for what we're about to hear tonight, because although the conference and the book covered such things as Asian American Buddhist identities, profiling the new Buddhists, modes of Dharma transmission, including things like the internet, or even writers like Gary Snyder, who brought together so many different aspects of literature and practice, East and West, inter-Buddhist associations in which Asian and Caucasian groups worked together to try to discern what Buddhism could mean, and finally the scholar's place in American Buddhist studies, academic studies, and so on. The thing that interested most of the attenders, and Diane Eck was our keynote speaker, was what is the shape of the new Buddhists? At that time, we thought there were probably 3 to 4 million Asian American Buddhists in the country. These are very, very hard to count. But among the largest numbers that were formulated at the time, probably less than 1 million were convert Buddhists, okay? So what kind of a person was that? James Coleman's book came out a year or so later, but he gave a preview, which is a chapter in this book. And here is the typical American white Buddhist in 1997, a 46-year-old white female from a mainstream religious background with a master's degree and personal income of $50,000 in today's value. That would probably be possibly low six figures. Spends between 30 and 60 minutes a day in meditation or chanting, holds liberal views of life and politics. At the same time, she's turned off by a good deal of what passes for modern culture and is inclined to try new beliefs and practices. She is likely to be single or divorced, living away from her parents and siblings, and, quote, at a turning point in life. That's a typical Buddhist in 1997. There were more like that than any other kind. The other little excerpt I'll read is that in my introduction to the book, I tried to boil all of these observations down into 3 kinds of marks. The 3 marks is a great thing to do in Buddhism, of American Buddhism. And the 3 marks that I came up with, of course, sound very academic, but nevertheless. One was democratization, by which I meant the leveling of traditional spiritual institutional hierarchies, entailing both laicization, that is lay practice as opposed to ordained practice, and the rise of women in American Sanghas in terms of leadership and participation. Second, pragmatism, an emphasis on ritual practice or observance, particularly meditation, chanting, devotional ethical activities, and its benefit to the practitioner, with a concomitant de-emphasis on beliefs, attitudes, or states of mind, a kind of agnosticism in terms of mainstream beliefs, but more, what is your practice? Buddhists say, what is your practice, not what do you believe, what do you have faith in, which is more typical of perhaps what a Christian might ask someone else. And finally, engagement, the broadening of spiritual practice to benefit not only the self, but also family and community, domestication, and society and the world, including the social and environmental conditions that affect all people, which might involve politicization, that is, Buddhist Peace Fellowship protesting against such things as nuclear power and so on. Now, even though that last item mentioned, it said broadening to benefit not only the self, but family and community, there was virtually no discussion in this entire volume, 20 chapters or so, of children, of families, of communities that had made parking and childcare or the transmission of Buddhism to young people possible, or reaching out to specific kinds of things like drug addiction, or today we have internet addiction. I mean, there are all kinds of issues that any compassionate person should be concerned with. But the book, like most books on Buddhism, American Buddhism, had to do with self-practice, retreats, meditation, the mystery of the mind, ethical perspectives, but more like the vow that we take to be loving and compassionate to all beings, but not necessarily the things that we would go out and feel like we had a to-do list of ways to be of service to the community as a Buddhist. Now, I think since 1997, a great deal has changed. And I think that Sumi and Tony are here to describe some of the shape and the texture of the communities that they serve and the innovative ways in which they have tried to respond and elicit energies which were there all along, but which were essentially neglected or latent as possibilities in American Buddhism. So I'd like to ask Sumi to start, and I'm going to introduce her with what I think is an incredibly impressive accomplishment. By the way, she and her husband met in my class. He was a fully robed, tantrid Korean Buddhist monk. We all thought it was kind of embarrassing that these two young people were looking at each other quite a bit when they're supposed to be listening to me, but we couldn't get it to stop, and he finally changed to a different Buddhist order which allowed marriage, and they married out at the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies. It was one of the most beautiful, moving events that I've ever been party to. And so that was a very special thing. Ilmi was a doctoral candidate here at Harvard, and now he's the head of the Korean Buddhist Studies program at Duke University. So Reverend Sumi Loundon Kim is the Buddhist chaplain at Duke, not Duca University. I think that's really cute. And ministered to the Buddhist families of Durham, the BFD. She's published 2 anthologies about young Buddhists, Blue Jean Buddha and Buddha's Apprentices, here with Wisdom Publications, and among other articles and chapters. After receiving a master's degree in Buddhist Studies in Sanskrit from Harvard Divinity School, she was the associate director of the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies. Originally brought up in a Soto Zen community in the 70s, she's been following the Theravada lineage for the past 20 years. Sumi and her husband, a native of Korea and professor of Korean Buddhism and culture at Duke, have 2 young children, and Priya is back there somewhere. Hi, Priya. Sumi, come on up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. All right. Good evening. It's so really sweet to be here. Let's see, where can I close this computer? Okay. I don't know. It feels like things have come full circle because since I met the person I would eventually marry in Chris's Buddhism in America course, then we did the thing that follows from that. We had children, and then as we had kids, I thought, well, now I need to help them learn about Buddhism, and I need to brainwash them before they rebel against me. And so I tried to find some kind of Dharma center that had a strong family program down in Durham, North Carolina, and there really wasn't anything. So I started what I thought would be a small Buddhist family group, and it very quickly grew to 12 families, and now it's about 24 families and growing. And so it's really because of Chris's class and meeting this guy and then having kids that now it's come full circle and we're back here. So I'm interested tonight to share with you a little bit about the background of maybe why we haven't seen very many families in meditation centers, Dharma groups, and to some extent temples. And then to talk a little bit about what we could do to structure programming for parents and children, and what the implications of that might be for the future of Buddhism in the West. You know, if you think about it, if you go to any church or synagogue or probably Hindu temple, you would completely expect to see a Sunday school or some kind of program for the children, right? You would never go to a Congregationalist church, and unless it's a bunch of blue hairs, there's always children's programming. But you walk into most Western Buddhist centers or meditation centers where there are primarily Western converts, and there's really almost nothing for children and almost nothing for parents either. And so when we look at the broad landscape of religiosity in the West, in America, Buddhism is pretty unique in not having that. So why is that? I think it comes from a couple of things. One is that Westerners have decided to make meditation their primary practice and their form of Buddhism, as opposed to other aspects in the Buddhist tradition. And I don't know if you've been around little kids, but kids in silent sitting, not such a mix. You know, like if our primary practice was beach parties, we would have lots of families involved in Buddhism. So, you know, it's hard to bring kids into something that's silent and still, because they are not of the nature to be silent and still. So that's one reason. The second is that, especially even maybe 20 years ago, but certainly earlier than that, among couples, it's very common that one person was very interested in meditation, Buddhism, and so forth, and the other person was something else, Catholic, nothing, a yoga person. And so commonly you would have couples in which one person was going to their local Zen center every Saturday to do the practice, and the other one was not participating. And so, as often happens in families where you have parents with two different spiritual or religious tracks, the kids do neither. And it's just sort of an agreement that happens. The third factor is that a lot of parents, particularly in the baby boomer generation and maybe to some extent Gen X, have a strong feeling about not imposing religion on their children. So they're very reluctant to indoctrinate or to acculturate or to even educate their children. They much rather have their kids find their own way. I think that's quite problematic, actually. I don't think, I could get into that later. I think it's important to church our children and maybe at a later point let them choose for themselves, but some initial education is extremely valuable. And the last is that the primary exporters and importers of Buddhist practice and tradition have been monastic. And so that sort of sets a tone for how we think about it. And notably, in those Buddhist lineages that are more lay oriented, such as Soka Gakkai and Nichiren and so forth, Shin, where the leaders are family people, you see a lot more family programming. So that's some of the backdrop about maybe why we haven't seen so much of this. It's not to say that there aren't programs for children coming up in centers. Shambhala has some good stuff, and there are things out there. But from my perspective, those are by and large addenda. They're kind of, you have your main adult population doing their thing, and then there's like the tacked on, we'll do something for kids. And so not that many resources are put into it. It's not that consistent. It tends to be from a parent-driven initiative, and then, it's too much work and they let it go, or they get too busy, or the kids aren't interested enough, or it only meets once a month. So there's a lot of ways in which good attempts flounder. But I do think we're starting to see some attention to it. So my question has been, what would it be like if instead of having a community that serves primarily adults, we had something that was really just for families? And the assumed unit of membership was not the solo adult, but a family unit. So for the last 3.5, almost 4 years, I've undertaken what I think of as kind of an experiment to see, well, how would you do this? How would you structure it? And so we're a little bit, the BFD, we like to giggle about our initials, BFD, because it is a BFD, is sort of an incubator. And a model has emerged that I think could be worth considering for other groups. So I call this the 4 foundations of a family program. So the first foundation would be, it's amazing how many people don't get this, have something weekly. Every whatever. I like Sunday morning because down in North Carolina, we're in a predominantly Christian area. Everything's closed down, no malls, you can't buy liquor, nothing. So it's a great time. Live families have nothing to do, and so that's when you offer family programming. But it has to be weekly. When it's less than weekly, people don't get a chance to connect with each other. And that weekly contact among parents and children who are in the classes together, It's very, very important for relationship building. You've got kids coming from different schools, parents from different parts of town. They all need time to get to know each other. And if you do it once a month, and let's say on that once a month, a family, they had a soccer game somewhere far away and they couldn't make it, that means they've gone 2 months without contact. Or even if you do it bi-weekly, you can have families go for a month or 2 months in which they have no contact with the program. But if you offer it weekly, then if they do miss something, they always know there's next Sunday to come and do that. It's such a simple idea, and I think it's a point missed by a lot of the programs out there. The second foundation is that what we do is place equal emphasis on the cultivation of the adult practitioner, the parents, and equal emphasis on the children. So a lot of the programs that I've seen here and there across the country, I look at their websites, they've got something for the kids, but the parents can just do drop-off. Or maybe if they want to, they can go sit with the larger adult population. Or there are programs that are directed for parents, like Mindfulness Day for moms, but nothing for the kids. So I think it's very important that the parent is developed with equal strength as the children in order to allow for integration of learning into the family. It's one of the criticisms I have of mindfulness in schools. There's a huge effort to bring mindfulness into public schools, and I think, well, that's great for the kids. Now they're going to be more empathetic, mindful, and so forth, and they're going to go home to just as unconscious, dysfunctional parenting. I'm not really sure that's good for them. Great, I'm more sensitive to my dad's anger. So, we have to think about the parents as well. The third foundation, and this has come somewhat later in my development of this model, and now I think it's really core, is to have a parallel curriculum so that the adults are learning the same material at the same time as the children. So for example, we did the 5 precepts. Parents learned about non-harming on the same Sunday that the children learned about non-harming. The value of this is that then the parents can, throughout the following week, integrate that. So, on Tuesday, a spider crawls out from the cupboard. Parent and child can look, should we kill this spider? Well, what did we learn on Sunday about whether we should kill? Is there a better way to handle this spider and be in touch with my fear about spiders and so on? The other reason that I have found that this is necessary is that most adults who are coming into these kind of Dharma meditation Buddhist groups are not very educated about Buddhism at all. They don't know nothing. They maybe have done a little meditation in a yoga class. And so they have some apprehension. They don't want their kids indoctrinated. I've had parents tell me, I don't want my kids to become Buddhist. I don't want to become a Buddhist. And then I'll say, well, what is that? And then they'll say, anything that's Buddhist? And I'm like, yep, that's what I thought. You don't know. So if we educate the parents, then they come to realize, like, oh, well, actually, this is really valuable, and this Buddhism stuff is really good, and I do want my kids to learn it. So that's one reason we have to work hard to educate parents as well as children. Okay, and the last foundation is that we have paid Sunday school teachers. This is very unusual because most churches, you have volunteer Sunday school teachers. However, what we found by having paid teachers is we have excellent attendance from the teachers that provides consistency. Consistency is super conducive to learning and to the relationship between the children and their teacher. And what we do is we hire people who are not Buddhist. We hire people who have classroom skills. They have to have taught in a classroom of children before, because it turns out it is much easier to teach a non-Buddhist how to teach following the breath than it is to teach a Buddhist how to manage a classroom of 7-year-old boys, right? This meditation thing is not rocket science. I mean, it is, but managing kids is hard, very, very hard. So once we started hiring experienced teachers, the classroom environment really stabilized, and there were clear and consistent rules and expectations and consequences. And so the kids started learning a lot more because they weren't fighting with each other and testing boundaries and the things that kids do. So from these 4 foundations and some other things, what I see is that the community I'm a part of is very vibrant. I think it's going to be enduring, it's robust, it's a powerful model. And some of the positive qualities that are coming out of it is, first of all, we have excellent attendance. I think because you've got 2 sides wanting to come. Either the kid wants to come and see their friends or have a cookie or something. You got to have food, by the way, in these things. Or you have the parent that just like, God, I've had such a stressful week. I need to go and see other parents and meditate and relax. So you've either one or the other. And so therefore, the not coming has to have both sides agreeing not to go. So there's a higher threshold to get over for non-attendance. And the other thing is that we have excellent member retention. Because the kids are having a very good experience and parents are able to connect with other parents. And that connection around that primary identity of parenting forms an instant point of social connection. So, if you go to a Dharma center, what you have in common with the people there is that you're all interested in meditation. And that's good. That's a very good starting point for a lot of conversation. But when there's an identity group, LGBT, women's, recovery, all these things, there's another point at which people can connect and become intimate with each other. And so that same thing is happening among parents. They can immediately talk about how bad they feel that they yelled at their kid this last week. And so that bonding has been really powerful for the parents. And it develops a part of Buddhism in the West that is, many have said this before, that is really underdeveloped, and that is the third jewel, the jewel of community. The second positive quality that I've seen come out of this is that we have almost the same number of men as we do women. Usually if you go to a temple, Dharma center, it's majority women. But here it's almost 50-50. We have 1 or 2 single moms, but it's almost 50-50 with male participation. And there's a study that has shown that the father's religiosity is the strongest predictor of the adult child's of a child's adult religiosity. So if a father goes to church regularly, the child has a much higher chance of going to church regularly as an adult. Interestingly, and sad for me, no matter how religious the mother is, if the father does not go to church, the child usually does not end up going to church. Who can say why that is? But that is that comes from a very large and interesting study. And the third, another positive characteristic that seems to come out of this is a level of stability. You've got a lot of Dharma programs trying to reach out to young people, and they tend to reach out to college students, and no disrespect. But the college student population is a very transient population. They're in town for a few years, and then job, marriage, whatever, they move around. And great that they get exposure to Dharma through a center, but they don't necessarily stay as members. Whereas the parent population tend, not always, but tend to be in town for at least 10 years, maybe 20 years, and maybe have lived there for life. So in terms of reaching out to younger generations, post-boomer generations, this 20s to 30s to 40s age group as parents is a very stable population, and they usually have pretty good incomes. So something to bear in mind. Okay, so some of the challenges. and there are many. It's really, really hard work because it's very resource intensive. We don't need just one meeting space. We need one meeting space and 4 classrooms. All right, so that means the rent is higher. We're not just supporting one teacher, we're supporting 4 teachers. We pay them $50 a Sunday. So it takes a lot of financial resources. Lesson planning. Okay, those of you who might groan about having to prepare a Dharma talk, think about every Sunday, I not only prepare a Dharma talk, but 4 lesson plans for 4 different age groups and classes. And the number of emails between me and the teachers, and who's going to pick up the book from the library and get the Play-Doh, and who's going to reimburse. It's very resource intensive. The second challenge is that we have some difference between those members who were churched as children and those members who were unchurched. You know what I mean by that? So people who were raised with some kind of religion and those who were raised with nothing. So the parents who come who have been churched, they kind of get like how much it takes to run an organization, and they're really good about volunteering and stepping up. But the parents who are not churched really enjoy coming and meditating and then leaving. They don't really understand, like how religious organizations work. And so there's more effort on my part and other people to kind of orient people to being a little more engaged and active. But it's not just this church unchurched, it's also the Buddhist thing. For some reason, we draw people who like to do nothing, which is great, but it has its limitations, this nothing. I was talking to a monk in Korea. He has a temple, and asked him, how's your membership? And anyway, at one point he said, oh, I love it when former Christians join my temple because they do so much for the temple, whereas the other Buddhists, they come, they pray, they bow, they chant, and they leave. So maybe it's a Buddhist thing, not just church versus unchurched. And another challenge that's been very interesting to work out is the secular religious divide. So I think the members who come, and I'm sure this will be typical of almost any Dharma program out there. You have people who are really into Buddhism, qua Buddhism, they love the religiosity part of it. And then you've got people who are very secular, they don't want religion. It's scary to them, they feel it's bad. And then there's people kind of in the middle, or maybe don't even think about it. And in my community, the people who are secular are kind of rabidly secular, in the sense that they don't want bowing, they don't want incense, heaven forbid there be a Buddha statue. And then on the other side, there's some people who kind of would like more of that. But what is an even greater tension is that children love smells and bells. Children connect to spirituality, to religion, through their senses, through food, through iconography, imagery, through candles, through incense, through bowing form. They love chanting, relationships, all of these senses, are music, is very, very important to them. So the thing that works for children in terms of helping them experience the spiritual world and give it expression is exactly the thing that their parents have an allergic reaction to. So it's been hard for me to find, like how far can I push this boundary? So sometimes, actually, the children's classes are maybe a little more religious than what I do with the adults, which tends to be more psychologically oriented. And at this point, we actually have some kids who identify themselves as Buddhist. They'll say, oh, I'm Buddhist. But parents, no. This is interesting how this is working out. Okay, and then just say something about the future, the potential here. I'm not sure if you're aware of the Pew Charitable Research report that came out about American religiosity. But there's a very interesting statistic that in adult populations post-boomer, so these are people in 40s and younger, I believe, about a quarter of those people identify as nuns, N-O-N-E-S. And of those nuns, many of them would say that they are spiritual but not religious. So they don't have any affiliation, but they want that sense of connection. They do understand that there's more out there than, you know, maybe just what they can see and touch, and they're looking for meaning and community and belonging and life's big questions and so forth. And of those people, many of them are becoming parents. And I think what's happening is that these people begin to have kids, and suddenly they think, right around when the kids are around age 3 or 4 and can talk and start to think and express themselves, it would be a good idea to teach my kids about generosity, kindness, connection, service, honesty. Where can I find out about that? Oh yeah, church. And so like Madonna, who was wrote all these kind of anti-Catholic things, then she has her child, and next thing you know, Lotus is getting baptized in a Catholic church. People are like so confused. But once you have kids, you get it. You're like, oh yeah, of course you can go from anti-church to pro-church, you know, as soon as you have kids. So what I see are these nuns who are becoming parents, kind of like, I need something. I need something for my family. Public school doesn't do it. You know, where do I get this? And these people are often looking at 2 different possibilities. One of them is my group-ish, sort of. They're maybe interested. And the other is the Unitarian Church down the road, or I should say fellowship, Unitarian Fellowship down the road. So my biggest competitor are not other Dharma centers. No, because they don't have that stuff. It's the Unitarian Church. It really should tell us something. And the Unitarian Church in the Southeast and Southwest is seeing a tremendous influx of these parents with very young children. And most of them are unchurched. The other thing to observe here is if you walk into most Dharma centers, meditation groups, and so forth, what you see are about 75%, just my eyeball estimate, 75% boomer, people in post-parenting phases of life. If we think about the future of Buddhism in the West, this is not a good statistic that 25% of the people at a Dharma center are in parenting-ish stages of life, because we want at least 50-50, maybe even flipped. When the baby boomers, who still have many decades to live, but when they pass away, Goenkaji passed away recently, you know, when they pass away, who's going to inherit this? Who's going to carry this forward? If it's just 25%, that is a very small community. We are looking at becoming like TM or the Hare Krishna, you know, it's going to become a very small thing. So if we want to see Buddhism flourish in the West and really take root and become diverse and vibrant, we've got to get on this generational question. And I think that if you target the parent population, you get a generational 2-for-1 deal. You get the parents who are younger, and you get their kids. And many of them will not choose to remain Buddhist, but some of them, at least a few, will carry it on. The other thing is when we serve these children at a very early age, it's like giving them religion or Buddhism as a first language rather than as an acquired language. And when somebody has the Dharma as a first language, it has implications for fluency, for playfulness, for creativity. It also has some downsides, but you know, we all know a first language is incredibly valuable. So I really urge that we start to think about reaching out to young children and their parents. But what I think is holding us back is something unspoken and maybe unrecognized, and it's the shadow side of Buddhism in the West. I was at the a Buddhist Teachers Conference a couple years ago, and there were about 230 Western Buddhist teachers, and I say Western because there are people from Europe and Australia and so forth. And we had this interesting exercise in which it was called Cross the Line, and so if you can imagine a room like this, and there's a line down the middle of the room, and all the teachers are lined up on one side, and then the facilitator asks a question like, well, all the women, please cross the line. And in silence, all the women teachers cross the line, and the two or identify as women, I should say, stop and silently witness and look at each other. And the questions kind of go up in temperature. And at one point, toward the end of the exercise, the question was something like, all those of you who have come from families in which there was alcoholism, mental illness, abuse, domestic violence, and so addiction and so forth, please cross the line. I would say at least 80% of these Dharma teachers, and these really well-known teachers, names you would recognize, cross the line. It was so striking to me and others how much collective pain and trauma there was in the Dharma teacher community, that so many come from tremendous suffering and difficulty and have worked through it beautifully. But when people like us, and I'll include, I cross the line, when we hear the word family, even if we have positive experiences in with our current spouse and children, still, it's not comfortable. You know, it's very hard for me to work with families because I get to see ugly family dynamics, you know, parent being too hard on their child or being overindulgent or letting them be zonked out on videos, which I'm letting my daughter do on the iPad right now, but that's okay. And, you know, that it's hard. It brings up pain. And so I think that the Buddhist community needs to recognize this difficult side of our background. And the potential here is that if we face this suffering, as we begin to reach out to children and families, we really have the potential to heal a very deep wound in the American Buddhist psyche. And so it can be a source of liberation for us. And that's all I have to say. Yes, I, in theory, am supposed to be working on a book about this, but I've been so busy with this blessed family group, I haven't had time to get it done, but hopefully that'll come out, and I'll also put some stuff up on our website. But if you're involved in a meditation community now, I would urge you to maybe approach your leadership and ask them, could we start doing something? And just start with something small and simple, or if you don't have a community, what I did was I sent an email out to the local neighborhood listserv where I live and said, hey, I'm starting a meditation group for parents and children who wants to come. And people just showed up out of the woodwork. I had no idea. I thought it would be a complete failure, and then suddenly I had 12 families on my hands, and then very shortly after that, 24. And now we're looking at, quite a few other families are interested. But you can just start something small. And at first we had parents rotating, so parents would teach the kids while the other parents meditated. And then eventually we were able to hire teachers. And one thing, so the parents donate like $480 a year. Oh my gosh, it's a huge amount of money. But then you break it down, you're like, well, it's $40 a month, so that's $10 a Sunday. How much is babysitting? And then if you've got 2 kids, you're paying $5 for an hour of religious education, or time for your kid to think while you get to do meditation and talk about how to integrate what you're learning with your spiritual path and your parenting, that the path of parenting is a spiritual path with other parents. And then you say, well, is it worth $5? And people are like, hell yeah. And you're like, so give me your $4.80. So then, it's actually, financially, it's very doable. I mean, we don't say it quite like that, but. Are there other questions? Oh, sorry, you'll have to embarrass yourself and come and ask here.
I wanted to thank you for sharing your work with us. And I was curious if there are any partnerships with preschools or ways that this could infiltrate into sort of early elementary education and preschool education.
There are a lot of, there are a lot of programs out there, especially stress reduction and mindfulness programs. I don't remember the website, but if you just Google mindfulness in education, lots of websites will come up. So there are programs that are available for preschools and elementary schools, and you can get training in them. And I think they're really valuable. It really gives kids skills at a very, very early age, and that's tremendous. Again, I think the one downside of that is reaching out to the parent population. So I'd like to see built more into these are like a Sunday session or Saturday session for mom and dad with childcare provided so that they can learn what their kids are learning. But there's quite a bit out there, yes. Yes, it's very secular, but my experience with MBSR and these other secular mindfulness programs, they are secular, and yet they become very quickly not. As people become more vulnerable and as they open up to the relationships of people around them, and pretty soon they start talking in ways that sound pretty Buddhist, whether they know it or not. So I used to look down on these programs a little bit, but I've completely changed my mind. And if you think about it, Ajahn Thanissaro, translates dukkha as stress. Right? So if you look at it from that perspective, you might say MBSR and so forth are quintessentially Buddhist, because they really are directly looking at dukkha.
I think we have a mic that works now.
Excellent.
So I wanted to follow up on that, actually, Sumi. Actually, my class knows that while I had the flu this week, I missed my mother's 100th birthday, which was Friday, and I was supposed to be in New York with her for the birthday party, so I'll be with her this weekend, and it's going to be fine. But she was the first Suzuki piano teacher on Long Island. And if you know anything about Suzuki violin or piano teaching, it's a Japanese approach to introducing young children as beginners to an instrument. And in particular with the piano, because I've seen this in operation with her adorable students, one of the things they do before they put their hands on the keyboard is to bow to the piano, and they bow to the teacher, and they bow to the music. And then they basically center themselves, and they usually come with their mom. It's a little girl or a little boy, and quite often the mom is kind of like a tiger mom. She's not necessarily an Asian mom, but she's a mom who, darn it, is going to get my kid to be in Juilliard by the age of 6, something like that. And what she reported to me was that the spirituality dimension of Suzuki piano, actually, the kid got it right away. The kids loved bowing to the piano and the piano bench and the telephone book that they had to sit on to make it up to the keyboard. But it began to rub off on Mom, who quite often was a pretty rough customer, dragged a kid by the ear in for the piano lesson, and then walked into a very different setting. So my question is, I wonder if these parents who wouldn't want to see any candles or incense or say I'm a Buddhist or even a Buddha statue, maybe over the period that you've been working with some families, it begins to rub off a little bit. It sounds like that's what you were saying just a minute ago.
Yeah, parents definitely soften and come around to it, and but we always have new people interested. So I have kept it, it looks very Unitarian, what we're doing. It's sort of like a Western church format with Buddhist content, and people are very comfortable with that. We don't take off shoes if they don't want to. You know, we sit in chairs or pews. Some people bring meditation cushions. We do a very simple kind of non-denominational ceremony. But I do see parents coming around more to Buddhist teachings, and some of that is because I decided to do parallel curriculum. And before that, though, I was really just focusing on meditation. And then I realized, you know, if we educate the parents, they will actually begin to understand like how valuable these teachings are, and they won't put up any fight about their kids learning. If anything, they're going to become more interested than their kids. Actually, interestingly, we've had some couples come, and like one partner's kind of like, oh, and the other one's like really into it. And not a few times has it come out that, you know, then the other partner, like that one's coming all the time, they love it, and the other one's kind of like less interested. So, you know, it changes. A lot of things change once people start coming. I guess if I had to do it again, I would just make the whole thing more obviously Buddhist. I would just say, yep, there's the Buddha statue, but part of that's because we don't have our own space yet. But, you know, and we're going to chant, and we're going to bow, and this is how it's going to be. And I think that actually people will eventually, it'll feel weird to some people at first, but eventually they'll come around to it. And I'm not putting it out there just, you know, to be faithful to Asia or tradition or anything like that. I really feel that these, that forms have a very important way of binding community and of acknowledging the presence of others, of holding and defining our meditative experience, and of bringing togetherness. So it's not just form for form's sake. These have, it has a place, and then of course there's the whole part of children needing to connect to spirituality through their senses, and so these forms are important for them too. You know, as an adult, so I was raised with this, right? I'm not a convert. I was what you say, birthright Buddhist, right? And what I find as an adult is that nostalgia has a very important role to play in my experience of religiosity and spirituality. And I noticed this with my daughter, you know, just in the choice of reading Charlotte's Web. And I asked, why am I reading her Charlotte's Web and Little House on the Prairie? And it's because it's nostalgia. These are my childhood books. And when I read that to her, I feel deeply connected to myself and my past and my parents. And now I'm sustaining that connection into the next generation. And so now, like if I smell cedarwood incense or I do a bow, it connects me to all the people I knew who trained me and loved me and held me in community and so forth. And that heart connection, that nostalgia is very, very significant in my experience of spirituality. So you can't get that just from meditation. You have to involve the senses and some forms in order, and we sometimes think nostalgia is bad, like isn't that like an attachment? No, I'm talking about nostalgia as connection, as community, as relationship.
Yeah, I had a question. Do you find your teachers, the people that are non-Buddhist, do you find them converting more towards Buddhism?
The who? Oh,
your teachers
yes,
that you hire.
That is a great question. You know, so what we've hired are these kind of like young, they're sweet, they're in their 20s, and you know, one teaching the public school, but they're into yoga, so they have a sense of spirituality and so forth, and they really, they become interested, for one thing. And as they're learning what they have to teach the kids, of course, they're learning it for themselves. And so now we've had several teachers go on to do MBSR trainings, or sometimes we have them sit with us. And one of the women, she came and sat. We happened to do loving kindness practice. She was weeping by the end. That's when she realized she needed therapy. And, you know, I've just seen her flourish as a young, 20-something person. And the other value, for some reason, most of the people in my group are quite a bit older. I'm like at 38, I'm one of the young people. I have parents in their 50s with young children. So these older people have become like, not mentors, but sort of loving older presences to the teachers that we have who are teaching the children. So it's been a beautiful relationship building for these young people as well. Yeah, thank you for reminding me about that, yeah.
So Tony Stultz was a student in my class, it seems in 1994, which was maybe a year or two after it started. Sumi was saying that it was my Buddhism in America class that she and Ilmi met at, but those two courses were alternated for a number of years, so I just think of it as my Buddhism class in the college, in the Divinity School. But anyway, Tony was in the class, and it was through him that I met Bernie Glassman. And those of you who are reading Engaged Buddhism in the West may have already seen my chapter paying tribute to Bernie and his career and his contributions to Engaged Buddhism. But I want to thank Tony publicly for introducing me to Bernie, who's still a friend of both of ours. Tony, as you will see, has gone on to do some remarkable things that nobody has quite thought of to put together in the way that he's done that. So he's the founding director of the Blue Mountain Lotus Society in Harrisburg, PA, holds an MA in Pastoral Theology from the Episcopal Divinity School here in Cambridge, and studied for ministry in the Zen and Tibetan traditions. He completed his clinical education at the Penn State Milton S. Hershey Medical Center and holds a diploma from the American Psychotherapy Association. In the course of his ministry, Tony developed and has taught the technique of mindfulness counseling in prisons, hospitals, universities, businesses, public schools, and private practice. Branches of the Blue Mountain Lotus Society have been founded in south and western parts of the United States. We'll be seeing a lot of all of this in his presentation. Tony's the author of Soul Quest, Zen Lessons for the Journey of Life, the Book of Common Meditation, Free Your Mind, Four Directions of an Awakened Life, The Invisible Sun, and Free Your Mind, Precepts of an Awakened Life. He's contributing author to Life Cycles and 2 volumes which I edited, Buddhism, Engaged Buddhism in the West, and Action Dharma. And Tony's here today with his wife Becky and his son Evan. Evan's gone off to see the Coen brothers' new film, which is being shown over at the Brattle tonight, and he had a pass to that. Evan's a very, very cool guy who teaches martial arts, so I'm sorry you didn't get to meet him. We had a great lunch together. But Becky is here, and we're really pleased that she's going to advance the slides for Tony. She's capable of far more than that, believe me. So thank you, Becky. And Tony, welcome. It's always a pleasure to be with Tony. He has practiced mindfulness counseling on me many times, I can tell you.
Yeah, when my son said he had a ticket to get into the premiere of the Coen brothers' new film, I thought, well, geez, that's what I'd do if I was him. When Chris asked me to share with you tonight, he originally said, look, I really want you to tell your story. I really want you to talk about yourself. I know you never do, because it's so much about how things came to be. And so it was kind of an interesting experiment to do that, because it is true that so much of what I've done over the last 15 years in my ministry is a reflection of how I've been shaped and how I've developed. So I'm going to go through these as quickly as I can so that we have more time to do like Q&A, but I thought I would give you a brief snapshot of our communities and in how we do things. But it's a passage from one of the sutras where the Buddha says basically, when a follower has a good friend, a good companion, a good comrade, it is expected he or she will develop and cultivate the noble path. So I kind of like that, because to me that kind of sums up our approach to ministry. Being a good friend is so much about where people are at in their suffering and why they usually come seeking us out. Being a good companion is the development of community and really being a community for each other. And a good comrade is the way I look at being involved in the larger community around us and really having an impact on that. I'll just, that's So it was supposed to be about me, so I'm going to breathe fire, but that was my childhood picture as an action TV star. But keep going. My first inspiration spiritually would have to be my mother. My mother introduced me to spirituality as a very, very young boy. She's an evangelical Christian, and she still is. And she had a very difficult time with her son moving away from that tradition and into Buddhism. But over the years that she's seen me work, she has come to really respect what I do, and she's still an inspiration. My first experience of knowing I wanted to be a minister was when I was 5 years old, and I was in an old Methodist church, and I ran off and hid in the sacristy, which is the room where the clergy change their clothes, and I just knew from that point on in my life that this is what I wanted to do. So that's Mom. The other person who was a big inspiration in my life was my grandfather. He was a Methodist itinerant preacher. He was a professional wrestler and wrestled bears in the circus, and he was quite the character. But he really taught me how to, I remember him preaching, and he really had this wonderful way, and he was a huge inspiration. My dad was the first person to sort of introduce me to the idea of Buddhism and things of that nature when he was a very young boy, and this is going back into the late 50s. He actually was involved with a fellow who came back from the war and was involved in martial arts and Buddhism, and they shaved their heads. And so my dad had a lot to do with my interest in Buddhism early on, and he was always such a great supporter of my ministry. The other person, when I was 10, is when I really kind of like opened up to being this Buddhist world. And it was my Aunt Kay who was my real first Buddhist teacher, because she came into our family. She was the only Buddhist. She was the only Japanese person, and she felt very isolated at times. So I think when she found this nephew who was crazy about this Buddhist thing, she just loved me. And so we were still very, very close. And many of the ways that we've shaped our community has a Japanese flavor to it, even though we're very American, very Western. And a lot of it has to do with my respect and homage to her. Early influence for me was Joe Campbell. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with him. But these guys really, I call them part of my Dead Teacher Society, but these guys really changed my life. I mean, it wasn't I just read their book and, oh, that's cool. This was stuff that when I read it, it was like, my God, this is it. This is the way one needs to live. Very, very powerful to me. All these different traditions. Yeah, and I just fell in love with him. And then he exploded on the scene, and as Chris said, in '92. And he also gave me this perspective that it wasn't important that the religious stories be historical as much as what the mythic meaning of it was, and how important that is for our lives and our individual lives. Carl Jung was a huge influence to me because of the fact, you know who Carl Jung is? Okay. Because part of the thing that attracted me to him was the fact that he was using psychological language to translate Eastern concepts. And even though maybe people can argue he didn't get some things right, blah, 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 the thing is he had a huge impact on most of the world at that time in introducing a lot of these concepts in ways that Westerners could understand. Alan Watts, the great heretic. When I talk about Alan Watts, I get mixed reviews. Like if I'm in a group of people that are just digging this for the first time, they dig Alan Watts, right? But if I'm talking to academics, they all poo-poo Alan Watts. Well, Alan Watts, for me, was like my first real written teacher. And he really had a way of writing and communicating that was so powerful. And he had a huge inspiration. Now, I was being raised a Christian, and yet I'm also got this Buddhist thing going, and I want to be a minister. Well, there weren't many Buddhist temples on the corner, so I had to figure out a way to make a living doing this. So Alan had become an Anglican Episcopal priest, and then later ended up just teaching about Buddhism. And I thought, well, gee, maybe I'll do that too, only I'll do it one better. Next. So I went and worked for the Episcopal Church, and for 8 years I served as the assistant to this incredible man, Charles Martin, who taught me so much about how to build a community, how to take spirituality into the world and engaged. He had this great old worker priest model, and it was just unbelievable. And he probably more than anybody else shaped the way that I view how you do that. Big influence on me was Jack Spong. Is someone familiar with him? He's a pretty well-known writer, and I met Jack for the first time in New Jersey when a friend who was a Episcopal priest came out to me as gay, and then wasn't quite sure how he was going to do that, but we heard that this guy was okay with it, so we went down to New Jersey, and he met with us in his office down there in Newark. And Jack's been an influence on me theologically. And I think one of the reasons I like his work is because even though he's pulling from Tillich and folks like that, he's always been a priest and a bishop. So he's always looking at it from that perspective. So it doesn't get so dry. My first authentic real Buddhist teacher was Konchak Gyaltsen. Konchak was, Rinpoche was head of the temple in Maryland, where my wife and I ironically used to go to get away at the Holiday Inn. They had a cool pool. And one time I found out that this guy was on top of the mountain, literally. So I went up to the top of the mountain, and we fell in love with each other, and just have a wonderful, now he's no longer living in the States. He lives in India. He actually teaches in Dharamsala, but my first big Buddhist teacher. And I think I got from him the most was just the joy of the practice, the joy of the Dharma. And then this guy, some of you may recognize him. When I came here to study, I wanted to study with certain people here at Harvard. I snuck in the back door by going to EDS. I got a little bit of a scholarship there. And that was the Episcopal Divinity School. It's down the road. And I got to study here. And when I came here, I was still, sort of unsure, should I be an Episcopal minister? I was being groomed in some ways to go into the bishop stuff later. And everything in my life was Buddhism. Everything I did personally was that. And so Chris, more than anybody else, was the influence that, finally I just said, okay, I'm coming out as a Buddhist. That's it. I'm throwing down the gauntlet. And it was tough because as a family person, what are you going to do for food? It was a tough decision, but it's one I've never regretted. Big influence, of course, through Chris was the way that Ambedkar sort of was Buddha's modern man, the heretic Buddhist, so to speak, because he took the Buddhist teachings and he saw what they did for him, and then he reinvented them in a way so that they spoke to where he was working and what he was doing. That I found very inspiring. The other person that I was my first big influence was Roshi Bernie Glassman. I'm sure a lot of you know Bernie, right? The dude. And Bernie and I have known each other since 1994. When I first started out, I was very involved. I was on the board of directors at the Zen Community of New York when Bernie was just kind of starting out his stuff, and we've remained very close. Our communities are affiliated with the Zen Peacemaker Sangha, and Bernie is an elder in our school, our group. Al Bloom, I don't know if many of you know who Al Bloom is, but he was at one time the proctor for the Center for the Study of World Religions. He did his PhD here at Harvard, I think, and taught at the University of Hawaii. He is a Shin priest. We got to know each other through an article I wrote and presented. It was a tough gig in Hawaii. It was Oahu. And he was very supportive. We were trying to do something new. I never fit in anywhere. Probably that's like Karl Marx, the Marx Brothers. What was his name? Any club that wants me, I don't want to join. Right. And, when I was sitting down talking to him afterwards, and I said, maybe I should do this, maybe I should be this, maybe I should go to this lineage. He said, no. He said, you got to do your own thing. I know it's tough, but you got to do your own thing. This stuff is old. We got to do something new. So I said, okay. And I was just telling Chris that like 2 months later, he sent me this package. And in this package was this beautiful ornate box. And in it, he had just written, I can't publicly give this to you, but I want you to have this as an inspiration. It was his kesa he received during his ordination in Japan. And it was just a beautiful... Tell people what a kesa is. A kesa is the ordination robe that folks wear. So what is Blue Mountain Lotus Society? We named it Blue Mountain because the range there is called Blue Mountain. The lotus, of course, being the symbol of the Buddhist life, but we also have American lotuses growing right there, which is pretty wild. So we call it the Blue Mountain Lotus Society. At that time, I was trying to stay away from the word church or temple or sangha because it just sounded weird and nobody knew what that was anyway. This is sort of a basic explanation, an inclusive Buddhist community dedicated to sharing the liberating teachings of mindful living and compassionate service. That's kind of our byline, which actually Chris Queen came up with. You don't know if you remember that or not. The model for BMLS has always been that we wanted to touch on 4 areas, but we wanted the center of everything for us was going to be Sangha. So most people that come to our communities are sufferers, what I call sufferers. They're hurting in some way, and they're looking for something that will help with that. And so that's where a large bulk of our work is involved in doing pastoral counseling, we call it mindfulness counseling, and really being involved in those issues in people's lives. The other group of people that come to us are we call seekers. These are folks that are kind of just looking around for something different. Some of them have been disenfranchised from the traditions of their youth, and they're looking for something new. In our area, we have a lot of ex-Catholics that come to our area, a lot of Jewish people. And then the third element that is socially engaged. One of the things that was very important to me from the very beginning was to be very involved in the community and be involved in social action in the community, regionally and also on a national level. And I'll talk more about that. At the center of all of it, of course, would be Sangha. So we'll go through these fast. There's TJ, one of our guys, doing some counseling. Some of the counseling stuff that we do takes place in seminars. We do it together as groups. Keep going. Folks that I've been involved in prison ministry most of my life on and off. For the first 12 years, very heavily, ran started a halfway house, ran it for 5 years. Helped found the Harvard Prison Fellowship here. And so we still get involved in that. And the big thing that I found when I was running halfway houses is that you had to give guys a new sense of identity. So this is a fellow, Steve, who came to us from one of the prisons, the state prisons, and integrating them in community and giving them a new sense of identity and a new group of people to be with, I found to be the best way to prevent recidivism. And there's another picture of Steve and one of his friends. Another group that we reach out to a lot are youth that are disenfranchised. We have a great school called the Milton Hershey School. Some of you may have heard of it. It's right there in that area. But we also have a lot of kids that are dropouts from that school. This fellow in particular, Lee, was a person who had run away from the school. And so a lot of times I'll get a call from people saying, hey, this kid ran away or this kid did this, can you help him out? So Lee's one in particular I'm very proud of because I met him when he was 15. He was busted for marijuana. He got a girl pregnant, and he was just in dire straits. His father was in an institution, and his mother was homeless and an alcoholic and drug addict. Nothing. And so he's one of the boys, one of the guys that I've adopted into our Sangha family. And this is the presentation. I was very proud. He actually went to school and finished and got his bachelor's degree. So it's a really amazing thing. I could spend a lot of time talking about this stuff. This is just a picture of our center where the retreats are. These are seekers. More seekers. More seekers. Keep going. This is just a physical space. We'll zip through these pretty good. But this physical space was really important to us. We were a movable feast for many years. We rented different places. The Unitarians, we rented their shop for a while. And we just really felt like we needed our own identity, our own space. It was such a drag being a movable feast all the time. You can keep going. So this is just shots of the building. This is the old building. It was built in the 1930s. It's got a lot of cool historical aspects to it. We're trying to get it recognized as a historical building. Keep going. Keep going. And this is just, I'm just giving you a quick shot of everything. These are beautiful flowers. Yeah. We really tried to create a space. One thing that's really cool is that for us, this is like a pure land we created. And when people come here, a big part of it is the presence of this space. People come, they'll come off the street. We have a sign out front. People will come in and just sit and spend time there. They'll say, oh, we love this space. I just love being here. You can keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. One of the things Sumi was saying that you can keep going, I'll stop you whenever, is that one of the things that we found is that having ritual and having liturgy became central to the way we did things. And we do the smells and bells, and we've gotten real creative with robes and all that sort of thing. But we really found that that was crucial. You know, I started with groups actually here when I was at EDS at St. John's, and we got together and we meditated and stuff like that, but never built any community. And it seemed to me that the ritual part was something that people were hungering for, but often they were very defensive about it first, like you said. And so opening them up to that and just sort of just being it. We just decided, we're Buddhists, we're here, get used to us, you know? And that was a big step that really made things take off. Okay, so next thing you're going to see is kids. Families and kids are very, very important to us. The stuff that Sumi's talking about is like the cutting edge. We have found that we have experimented with many different things, like having monthly retreats for them, having weekly programs, Dharma school we call it. My wife is a early childhood specialist. She has her public degree. She was also a Montessori teacher, so I'm spoiled, and then I have her to use and to direct those programs for us. So, but the kids for us and the family part of it is very, very central. So everything that we do, we try to do it in such a way is that it's friendly to the families. And that's a moving target. You know, it's something we're always growing with. And I love some of the things that you were doing. I want to adopt some of those ideas. Like the parallel curriculum, we've never done that. That's a great idea. Teenagers are important to us as well, so we do have outreach to them. It's an interesting group. We find that teenagers dig us. They think we're cool, unlike a lot of religious groups, so we actually find that we're able to pull people in. This is just demonstration of liturgy. So one of the things in our cycle is having a liturgical cycle, and again, a lot of the words we use are Japanese, and that's a reference to influences of mine, to my beloved Aunt Kay. But we found that having a liturgical cycle is a really cool way to integrate people into community. So we start with the Healing and Reconciliation ceremony in the fall, which is Sagaki. And then we, in the winter, we have the Feast of Enlightenment, the Satori celebration. And then we have Obon, which is a celebration of our ancestors that we do in the summer. We do baby blessings for folks. We do marriages and weddings. In fact, when I get back day after tomorrow, I have a big wedding to do. We do funerals and memorial services. We do the blessing of beasts. We bring the beasties in, and we celebrate our animal companions as Buddhas as well. And then if people, most of our folks are seekers and sufferers. So if I had to give a quick split, I would say that 65% of our folks, 65, would consider themselves non-Buddhist, but it's like seekers and sufferers. And then the other half would be considered dedicated Buddhists. And that's probably much going to be that way because people, as they come in new, don't want to identify with anything right away. But as they get more committed, we do what are called the precepts. And we do a ceremony where they actually they study and they take the precepts during our Hanamatsuri, which is our big spring festival. And this is just pictures of, they make their own malas, and we do the study, and then they take the precepts, and it's a beautiful, beautiful ceremony. One of the things that we found early on as our community began to grow, that we wanted to have folks to do ministry, so we decided that we would just start it. And so we started a program. It's 3 years long. It has a mixture of academics as well as pastoral training, and it includes things like CPE, etc. And at the end of that, then they're called out to found their own communities and start their own work. And keep going. One of the things I want to highlight too is the diversity of our community. Trey here was someone that I met during a summer sabbatical at Oxford. Trey has now been fully ordained, and he represents the gay community as a part of our Sangha. And so we're very open about that. We did blessings before they were legal in Pennsylvania, and kind of involved that way. We're a very welcoming community to the GBLT community. That's him and his mom and dad, who were not sure about this whole Buddhist thing at first, but kind of came to it. And some more members of the clergy. And there's a growing Hispanic community in our area, so it was really cool when David wandered into our place one day and said, hey, I think I'd like to learn more about this. And so he's been with us for a long time, and eventually he decided he wanted to serve his community. That's him in the middle. So he is now one of our Dharma ministers. This is just another one of our guys, Pat, who I was just with out in the West Coast, who has started a Sangha out there. That's Pat again during his ceremony. This is Jeff, one of our clergy, and one of the fun things we do is we adopt certain traditions that are fun, and no one's required to shave their heads, but as a fun little thing we do, I will shave their heads if they want it. So Jeff is one of the guys who decided he wanted to go ahead and shave his head as part of the ceremony. There he is, looking very noble. Julie, is there anything you said about the mix? Our mix is actually fairly even guys and gals. Julie comes to us actually, we have people from many different areas. She comes from Lancaster. She originally studied at Oxford, and then she heard about us, and then she studied the Zen Contemplative group up in New York City and did that program, and then was really attracted just the way we did things. So Julie recently just finished our training program. It's connected to Pat Harris' group, yeah. It's their own contemplative.
Oh, the counseling.
It's their whole chaplaincy thing they have.
Oh, yeah, right.
I forget the exact name of that group. Jim is very interesting. Jim is a three-time veteran of the Iraq wars. Came to us actually dealing with a lot of PTSD, as they call it, etc. Became involved in the community as a layperson, took precepts, and eventually felt called that he wanted to do ministry. So he just finished and is going to be ordained, and we're going to be focusing on work with veterans. And we've done some of that work already, but we want to do more with that. And there's my son. That's when he graduated from high school. So one of the things we do, like when the kids have special things in their lives, we recognize them together as a Sangha. There's a fellow there who's an elder in our order. I think you might recognize. That's a very early picture. Keep going. And that's just how we've grown. These are just different pictures of clergy. And one of the things we do here is we are very sincere in our practice, but we do not take ourselves seriously at all. So if you don't have a sense of humor, you will develop one with us. Again, this is just more pictures of Hamatsuri and liturgy. You can just zip through these. We really found that was stop right there. One of the things, interfaith is huge to us. This is a representative from the Native American community. So when we did the official ceremony where the Sangha recognized me as their teacher, it was a little bit of combination of my Protestant upbringing, where you just sort of pick a minister, train him, and you ordain him, and the Jewish concept of the minyan, where you have the group that picks. So the community ordained me as their teacher, but I wanted to have different interfaith groups involved, and so this was the Native American fellow. You can keep going. Our liturgies are very experimental. We introduce different types of music at different times. And here's this great speaker that we had. Chris has been at several of our events over the years.
Hey, great robes.
We love robes. People often say about dressing up. Like I was at interfaith thing and they said we're going to wear robes. And I'm like, that's half the fun, is putting on that robe. Different people in our community that have had a big impact on us. This is Steve Tyson. You may know his brother Neil Tyson, the astrophysicist. So Steve's a big part of our community. He was part of the body that raised me up to be their teachers. One of the things we did, we wanted to develop a way to really support and hold up folks in our area that were doing social action and social engagement. And so Liz here was the director of the League of Women Voters, involved in many, many different levels. That's a big issue to me, is getting people involved and actually voting and so forth. And so she was one of our recipients. This is Carl Chopper. Carl is a Jewish rabbi, Reconstructionist, and he is the director of the Interfaith Alliance, which is our chapter of the national group, and does fantastic work. He and I are actually working on the Interfaith Homeless group together. Keep going. This is our most recent recipient, the wonderful Joyce woman. She is the director of the Metropolitan Church, Community Church, which is a gay, openly gay community group. She's so involved in our area. And this is one of our Muslim leaders. Very important to me that we have representation as much as we can across the board. We actually have quite a number of Muslims that come and practice with us. This is Andy Hoover, who is the director of the ACLU, who has become very involved in our community. And this is Sandy Strauss, who is a Catholic worker. Her husband died of cancer. She became a hospice nurse and now travels to missionary events, Doctors Without Borders. And she's just a fantastic person. So we're always trying to build up that larger Sangha. You can keep going. It's a great picture. We always involve the kids in the liturgy and doing stuff. Keep going, 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 keep going. There was a big talk there. I don't want to go back to that, but that was a serious talk there between Chris and Carl, if you remember that. Keep going, keep going. Keep going, keep going. One of the things we do, too, is that our Sangha is not just about meeting the times we have Monday services, Sunday morning services, we have retreats every week, we have classes throughout the week. But for us, developing the Sangha means going beyond that. So usually on weekends, at least one night a week, we all get together and we'll have dinner or hang out together. And just have fun. This is our Halloween party we have every year, which is a big bash for us. Keep going. We do things like we get together for skating parties, ice skating, roller skating. And I know that doesn't seem kind of that important, but to tell you the truth, that's how you really bond, by socializing outside of the religious part of things. We do a lot. We have a lot of dinners together. We are involved in a lot of, as a Sangha together, if there's some kind of cause, we're always involved in the walks for breast cancer, for different raising awareness, different groups. That was when I was a chaplain at the Hershey Center. That's me dressed up fully gowned because one of the patients I was visiting, you couldn't go in to see them. We do a lot of visiting in the hospitals, a lot of home visits. I always dress the part, because if you don't dress like clergy, they don't know who the hell you are when you go. That's a home visitation. But we, so we do a lot of that. Book talks are big for us. We found that by doing book talks at what was Borders originally, and Barnes & Noble and independent bookstores, that's a great resource to let people know about us. We'll take a book. We've done Blue Jean Buddha. We did it when it came out. And we'll get folks to come in that way. This is, we're involved in Pride Fest every year. So we always have a table, and we're part of the parade and the whole thing. For a while with the local television, WITF Public Television, I did a program called The Art of Mindful Living, which did really well. And we did it for a long time until the powers that be changed and the formats changed. So a lot of people went away. That's just us being involved with them. Keep going. That's, I do teach classes at the Hershey Med Center on mindfulness, on meditation. I do teach occasionally at different colleges in the area. Martial arts is a big part of our program, mainly martial arts for peace, we call it, and the anti-bullying programs that we do. There's the little boy that he teaches. That's my son and I together at most recent Interfaith celebration. I don't want to get political, but I believe very much in being engaged in things and working with the system. And so I was very fortunate to go to New Hampshire and also be heavily involved with Mr. Obama's campaign when he first came about. That's Linda Thompson, our local mayor. I've served as spiritual counsel to her. I was part of her inauguration. You can keep going. Steve Reed, who was the prior mayor, I was actually officially spiritual counsel to their office. And then I served as the first Buddhist chaplain in the Senate of Pennsylvania. And it was really cool because I was asked by a Republican to do that. I thought that was awesome. And then the woman on the right here was our former lieutenant governor. She, you can get the next picture. Kate was very sincere practitioner, kind of kept it under wraps a little bit because of the wider publicity. And those are just, you can keep going. We're very involved with Penn State University, which is a big university in our area. We support different students going through the process. That was one of our guys getting an alumni award. One of the cool things I've gotten to do beyond on the West Coast, do you like rock and roll? Do you like heavy metal? I don't know if you're gonna like. How about Black Sabbath? Anybody remember Black Sabbath? All right. So, do you know who this person is on? That's Ronnie James Dio and his lovely wife Wendy Dio. Ronnie was the lead singer for Black Sabbath, and Dio, very well-known guy. I got involved with them through his program called Children of the Night, which is a group that helps kids in prostitution get off the streets. And so we became very involved with them, and I had the great pleasure of getting to know Ronnie and being a friend with him until he died in 2010. We try to get the Dharma out in different ways, so one of the ways we've done it is through the arts. So this is one of our, that's my son and one of our clergy members who has a punk band called Running from Dharma that performs regularly, and believe it or not, these concerts are a lot of times where people will first find out about us. That's me singing too. I'm involved. I can't let everybody have the fun. And so that's an album we did that, again, same sort of promotion. That's me and my boy. That's my boy now. There's one of our, I love that picture of the big hotel with the rock and roll. I love to make films, and we made a film, I think it was 2011, called Who Am I? With one of my students who started out in our Dharma school, who's now a fantastic filmmaker, and hold on there, and then we entered it into Tricycle Magazine's film contest, and we were lucky, we got the first place on that one, so that was awesome. Internet, and you can see it on YouTube, yeah. So just you go onto our website and click on under media, it'll say Who Am I? You can just click right there. We try to stay internationally involved. We got associated with John Morgan and the Graduate Theological Foundation, which provides training for clergy professionally, and they're associated, much like the Extension School, through Oxford. That was a big program we did there in England. We're involved a lot in the local Asian community, mainly because of the fact that, we're Buddhist. And so there isn't really any Asian temples in our area. So one of the things I want to do is reach out to that. And this is Jen and her husband Michael Lee. They're from Beijing. We became very dear friends. We've known each other now for 13 years. And they got involved in our community. They have the best Japanese restaurant in town, best sushi in the world, and I've had it all over the world. And they're Chinese, which is awesome. This was a fun thing I did. You remember the Dover case in Pennsylvania? It was evolution versus creationism. It went to the Supreme Court. Well, I was fortunate enough to get asked to defend the teachers at the school by the ACLU, and I debated a professor from Messiah College over the relationship between science and spirituality, which is a real thing of mine. I do a program on Sirius Radio. It's a relationship program. It originally was on Playboy, and now it's on, I forget what channel it's on now. I'm one of the relationship folks, so we bring mindfulness and meditation out there. When I was out in LA, I did a live taping, 2 hours. Like Buddhist bunnies? Well, we never had any Buddhist bunnies yet, but everybody's accepted in our group, so. That was a guest lecture I gave at Oxford. That's just beautiful Oxford. This was the 2010 Symposium on Engaged Buddhism that Chris, you helped put together with the Zen Peacemaker Order and the Zen Peacemaker Sangha, and that was just a presentation that we gave that day. There's Bernie on the left. This is a real room that, you get lots of stuff over the years when you do it, like 20 years like I've been doing it. But the thing that this was all from the World Affairs Council and the interfaith community, all these socially engaged people. It was kind of embarrassing because some of the people there have been doing it for 40, 50 years, but it meant the world to me.
Within Harrisburg?
Within the central Pennsylvania area, yeah. Now, here is probably the most humbling and powerful experience I've had in my entire ministerial career. Some folks that knew me, this is Shanksville in Somerset, Pennsylvania, and all of you are familiar with Flight 93 that crashed there. Someone got in touch with me and said, would you represent, be a chaplain and help bury the remains of the folks there? And be a chaplain to the families. And of course I said yes, but it actually was it's a very involved thing. I wrote an article for Buddha Dharma magazine about it. It was a very moving experience. I can't do it justice here in this short amount of time, but essentially the remains of the folks had been in a mortuary for all that time, and it was just last year that they were finally able to go to rest. And the families came in. And a really moving thing for me was the Kuge family who had lost their son. And it was really great to meet them. And their son was in love with America like I was in love with all things Japanese, And we had this great exchange. But it was just an incredibly moving and very powerful day. There's my beloved Aunt Kay again. We have some extended Sangha in Japan, friends and family that live there. Actually, in December, I'm marrying one of our Dharma school guys who went off to Japan to teach English, and now he's getting married. I'm going to marry them in Florida in December. That's part of our council or individuals that have been influential to us or helpful to us. This is Rokan Ara. He is kind of like the presiding bishop of the Tendai Buddhist movement in North America. We became friends, and when I was in Japan, he hosted me there at Mount Hiei. That's Mount Hiei. Bob Aiken, before he died, was actually on our Sangha Council through Ginny. Ginny visited often at the Diamond Sangha there. And Steve Batchelor is also on our Sangha Council, and Steve is a great person to argue with. Yeah, I mean, he was very gracious in being a part of our council.
He's a great guy.
And my sister, a lot of our stuff was devoted to, my sister was an incredible bodhisattva practitioner near the end of her life, founded schools for kids that were falling through the gaps in the educational system. She founded 3 private schools entirely on her own. And she's our patron saint, as it is. And this is my dad. My dad was such a huge supporter of our work and made it so, the impact that he was able to make through his generosity was just incredible. And this is my beautiful wife. Now, I ended with this because I was thinking, how can I end this thing? The reason why we do stuff is because of these connections that we have. And my number one connection is to my family. So anything I'm going to do is going to put them up front. And like Sumi was saying, that's the change I think the big shift has to be in American Buddhism, is towards an intentional movement towards families, because that's the reason that I get up in the morning. And I always say that there are 3 priorities in my life. The first is my practice, because I'm no good to anybody without it. The second is my family, and the third is my ministry and my calling. And, that's the last one. The thing that we see overall is that the thing I try to inculcate is that this family idea is not just something that is about these local sanghas or communities, that everybody we meet is part of our larger family. It's part of my relation. They're all part of me. And so when I feel compassionate towards my son or someone in our sangha, when we're working in the community, those are also part of our sangha. so we try to have that larger sense of it. And one of the things I really try to bring is to bring joy to the sorrows of the world. And joy for me is the idea of, the joy and the joy of others. That really joy is experienced when it's through other people. And we try to bring that to the practice. I don't know about some of you, but when I was growing up and going to different Dharma centers, oh my God, were they serious, and oh my God, were they dry sometimes. And I really didn't like that. And in many ways, people joke, call me the Episcopalian Buddhist, but I wanted something that was warm and inviting and hospitable. And that's number one for us. So if you come to our centers, you're going to feel welcome. And you're going to feel like you're able to do whatever you want to do at first. And then once we get you involved, you're going to get really involved. But so anyhow, that's a quick flashpoint.
I'm so glad Tony shared so much of his life and his work with us. We're almost out of time. I have plenty of stuff I always like to say, but who'd like to jump in with a question? If I don't see a hand go right up, I'm actually going to ask Becky to say just a few words to kind of tie things back to what Sumi talked to us about, because I didn't realize you were that involved actually with the Dharma school stuff. I know you were a teacher and a special ed, not a special ed, but a educational specialist. But if you could just say a couple of words about work with all those adorable kids that we just saw on the slides, please. Stand up.
Well, we do different programs. We do a weekly offering for kids, and we also do a summer camp for which we get a lot of kids from a lot of different types of family backgrounds and religious traditions. And so we keep it we don't go too much into Buddhism, but we can give the practices without actually calling it Buddhism. So we kind of do the mindfulness, we do the meditation, we do some yoga, we do all of that without actually calling it Buddhism, but it kind of gives them those practices and gives them the mindfulness. And we find that the families really seem to appreciate it.
We try not to do the Buddhism stuff too heavy on like the camps, because so many people are coming from different places, and we don't know where they're coming from, so we don't want to turn them off to anything too quick. Go ahead.
My question is, for you, what is the best part and what is the biggest challenge for you to keep and build and keep this community? Thank you.
That's a great question. I think the greatest reward for me, and Chris and I were talking about this, is that when you get to be a minister, and I'm sure this is true of any faith tradition, but for us, when I'm having a tough time in my own life, one of the most liberating things for me is to know that I'm going to the office, and my wife will even joke about it. She'll say, I'm so glad you're going to the office, because by the end of my day of being involved with folks, I get to see my own stuff reflected in them, and I feel so liberated. By the end of the day, I'm just laughing. And that's my greatest reward. The greatest challenge, I think, is we try to do everything. And that's the biggest challenge. Is like you don't want to spread yourself out so thin that you're not really doing it effectively. But there's so much need out there, and I'm a doer, and I'm an action guy, So that's the biggest challenge, is doing that with integrity and authenticity. We always try to do that, but there's so much to do. And sometimes I think, man, we should just cut back and just focus on this work or that work. And then the next day I'll be involved in that one, and I'll be like, no, we can't do that. We got to stay with this part. We can't give that up. So that's the biggest challenge.
I'd like to say one thing in closing, which has really kind of been a unique theme that Tony and I have worked on together over the years. And I think you can understand it now that you've seen all that he does and the unique energy and vision that he brings to it. This man is basically not ordained by any lineage in the Buddhist tradition. And that is not because he hasn't approached various teachers and said, I would like to have your blessing or your ordination or your whatever to include me into this tradition so that I will have that official authenticity, because there are a lot of American Buddhists who say if you're not in a Japanese lineage or a Tibetan lineage or not so much Vipassana because it's a lay movement and so on, but there are a lot of very theologically conservative Buddhists in this country. And what Tony is doing is really kind of embarrassing to some of those people. I didn't name any names or anything, or because he's such a kind of a force of nature and he keeps thinking of new ways to do these things and reaching out to other people, they never thought of that stuff. And it makes, I mean, I'm speaking very frankly, it makes other people look kind of bad because they're not doing all of that. It needs to be done. And so here's a guy that just basically said, fine. And he touched on this a couple of times. He'd go to people like Al Bloom, who just said, Tony, just do your thing, and I'm going to send you my kesa, which is the holiest object that I have, to show you how much I respect what you're doing. So that's what we've seen here tonight, is somebody who just said, well, fine, if the Buddhist authorities aren't going to recognize what's going on here, I can't be held back by that, because Buddhism and the Dharma and Sangha is too important to leave behind. I get choked up talking about this. So.